The Boys Season 5 Episode 4 is officially here, so let's just get right into it because today we're talking The Boys Season 5 Episode 4 breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting into some of the things that I really liked about this episode, I absolutely loved that entire exchange between Firecracker and Homelander from the very beginning, where Homelander could literally smell Soldier Boy all over Firecracker, and in this moment, she panics virtually right away and she tries to play it off and say it was all because of the interview that they had to do. However, in this moment, Homelander quite literally replies, "No, I can smell him literally all over you." However, he disregards basically all of this and then starts to thank her for always having faith in him and then gives her her new mission. And that new mission is to get people to accept him and worship him as God, because he truly believes that he is the one and only God. He is the next Messiah. And I really like that Firecracker has been slowly realizing how utterly insane Homelander is. And the tension in this scene was so drastic, in my opinion, to the point where I thought at any moment Homelander was going to kill Firecracker. Because keep in mind, he can hear people's heartbeat. So would her heart not be racing an insane amount when he's asking about Soldier Boy, when he doesn't accept your explanation for Soldier Boy and continues to ask about it and then gives you this insane plan that you now have to follow? Yes, it would definitely stand to reason that her heart would be racing. So in this moment, I actually thought that Firecracker was going to be killed. However, it does make sense, at least for the time being, that she does remain alive because Homelander does probably still need her and he needs her influence in order to ensure that people do actually end up worshiping him. However, I feel like she's going to be added to the list of people that are going to be on the watch to betray Homelander and inevitably be killed. However, I'll get to that at the end of the video. But since I did mention Soldier Boy, he absolutely nailed every single scene he was in this episode once again. Soldier Boy is probably one of, if not my favorite character in The Boys. He is a horrible person, but watching Jensen Ackles perform as Soldier Boy is some of the best TV I've ever watched. He is so enjoyable on screen. His first interaction that we get of him in the episode is him being summoned to Sister Sage, and he makes it a point to say that it's not okay to just summon him like that, especially not her. However, the thing I like most about this scene is she is going into his ego like she has been playing into Homelander's ego. She mentions that Homelander found where V1 is probably being kept. They found the facility where Soldier Boy quite literally got the V1. And we can see in this moment, Soldier Boy does not want this to happen. And although Sister Sage doesn't come out and say it, the entire reason she is saying everything she is saying to Soldier Boy is because she knows he will go there and try to stop Homelander from becoming immortal. So I'm really intrigued to learn more about Sister Sage's plan. I feel like she's definitely got some type of crazy endgame in mind, and I absolutely cannot wait to see it. It is probably one of the things I'm most excited about in this series, just because I honestly have no idea what that ultimate endgame is. But she's the type of character that is keeping everyone on their toes. And to me, she's either going to end up with some insane final endgame, or she is going to be caught trying to betray Homelander in some way, or trying to play things to her favor, and Homelander, after becoming immortal, is just going to end up offing her. But only time will tell. I won't add her to my definite to die list yet. But since we are talking about Homelander getting V1, that actually brings me to another one of the scenes that I absolutely loved, and that is the entire interaction we get between Homelander and Soldier Boy. As I said, virtually every time that Jensen Ackles is on screen, I absolutely love every moment of it. However, when you pair him with Anthony Starr as Homelander, the scene is just absolute perfection. This is a simple scene of them just walking through the woods, and right away, Homelander gets his cape stuck on a tree, and Soldier Boy mocks this, and Homelander then says, well, we could have just flied there. And Soldier Boy having an issue being carried is so absolutely hilarious, and it just goes to show you how much of an ego each of these two people have. Homelander getting his cape stuck on multiple branches bothers him so much. Soldier Boy has such an ego, he won't even agree to be carried if it will get them there even faster. He does not care about that. he cares more about how he is seen. And we actually learn a little bit more about that in this episode, which I also really love. So I want to get right into that as well, because we actually find out that Homelander did a lot of digging on Soldier Boy, and he found out what happened when he actually got injected with V1. Soldier Boy cried. Soldier Boy actually wet himself, and Soldier Boy was only there because he was jealous of his brother. Now, I think they mentioned this brother because he'll probably be shown in the Vault Rising series that Jensen Ackles did confirm is already fully filmed. So I will have a couple theories on that in another video, so make sure to subscribe. I also really love that during this little walk up to the facility for V1, they actually start to talk about Stormfront, and Homelander actually finally asks Soldier Boy about Stormfront, and Soldier Boy in this moment confirms that they had sex, and then Homelander quite literally says, "Oh, then I guess we're related in another way," which definitely wasn't how I expected the interaction to go. However, I don't necessarily have an issue with it. It was still a really funny sequence, and it ended up turning a lot more serious when Soldier Boy asks what happened to her, and Homelander literally says that she died and that she ended up unaliving herself. And in this moment, I actually found it really intriguing that Soldier Boy just did not believe this at all and said that she would never do that. So I wonder if they are going to revisit that at any point, or if this is going to be the only mention of it. I really hope that we do get a definitive answer. But another scene that also had Soldier Boy in it that I absolutely loved was him actually turning on Homelander. Now, this was somewhat a result of the plant soup that had been there, and it was affecting everyone and causing this hatred. However, that hatred had to be there for the flames to be stoked. So those feelings have been there between Homelander and between Soldier Boy. And that actually all culminates in this moment as Homelander gets led down this tunnel and then locked in a room. Soldier Boy then says this is a room that they used to test on soups to see how much it would take to kill soups, to see what soups could survive this. And then he turns on this machine, and it quite literally makes Homelander start puking, and his face gets all messed up. I believe he is bleeding as well. And while this does raise a couple of issues that I'll talk about a little bit later, it is still a really cool interaction between Soldier Boy and Homelander that now confirms to Homelander that Soldier Boy doesn't want him to get V1. He doesn't want him to be immortal. He wants to be the only immortal one. He wants to lead the Seven by himself. He doesn't want to share that with Homelander. And now Homelander officially knows that. But while Homelander is trapped, we do have some other antics going on. Frenchie actually ends up somehow manipulating Soldier Boy to killing this plant soup, to the point where when Soldier Boy first sees him, he does acknowledge how much he hates this person. However, Soldier Boy quite literally says that the state this plant soup is in is probably worse than death. So he doesn't want to do anything to give him an easy out. But then Frenchie decides to manipulate Soldier Boy and goat him into using his blast, which does fry the plant soup almost immediately. So good on you, Frenchie. That was definitely my favorite thing you did in this entire episode, and it somewhat makes up for the unfortunate thing that happens later. Unfortunately, that is Kimiko probably deciding that she doesn't want to date him anymore, which I feel like we've already retreaded this, and this just reconfirms Frenchie's gonna die because she's going to say this, and then they'll probably end up discovering that they want to be together, or Frenchie wants to change, only to find out that Frenchie gets killed either moments later or in the very next episode after they have this revelation. It is just too easy not to do for the writers, and I feel like it will add so much heartache, not only for the characters, but definitely for the audience that wants to see them end up happily ever after. So Frenchie, you are 100% going to die this season, in my opinion. However, you did manage to manipulate the second strongest soup who has ever lived, so that is a pretty awesome move. If you do end up kicking the bucket, you definitely contributed a ton, not to mention you're creating the virus that's gonna kill all of them, so worthwhile sacrifice. I don't know. Another scene that I really liked is that Homelander goes to confront Soldier Boy after he ends up escaping, and he activates his laser vision right away, and Soldier Boy in this moment tells him to get it over with, tells him to just do it. And in this moment, Homelander stops and he asks him, "Are you crying?" And I feel like this is going to lead to these two characters actually developing a father and son type of bond. They are going to get a mutual respect for one another. Homelander already had that respect for Soldier Boy, and yes, that definitely has been tarnished. However, he still looks up to him, and that is evident by the fact that he did not kill Soldier Boy. The only two people who have disrespected Homelander or betrayed Homelander and survived have quite literally been Ryan and Soldier Boy. They have openly gone against him multiple times, and yet both of them still live. And it was a choice that Homelander made every single time. So I feel like this is going to solidify them to become even closer. And in my opinion, the only way Homelander would turn on Soldier Boy is if the V1 does corrupt him even more to the point where he sees Soldier Boy as a threat and he does just have to off him in order to complete his ascension. However, aside from that, I feel like Ryan or Butcher are going to end up killing Soldier Boy, which is going to be pretty unfortunate because he is an awesome character. However, that is essentially all I have as far as praising this episode. Now I have to get into some things that I really did not like about this episode. I actually had quite a few issues. The entire Starlight storyline was incredibly boring. I didn't care about her whole family situation and her long lost dad and I guess half brother who turned out to be a total dick who reported her to the authorities because he believed she was a murderer. It was just so absurd and stupid and felt like such a plot device to, number one, get her out of the story with the boys, which I'll get into in a little bit. However, it also felt like a plot device to get her to just realize that being with the people you love is the point of fighting, not being away from them to keep them protected. That goes against the entire premise of fighting for what you love. I feel like she either could have learned this a different way, a much quicker way, or she should have just already known it. This is season 5. I feel like this type of moment should have been in either season 3 or season 4. It would have been more impactful, it would have made more sense, and to me, it just does not fit and was a really big waste of time considering it was a big chunk of the episode. However, in addition to it being a plot device for Starlight to acknowledge that she needs to be around the people she loves, because I guess that is a hard concept for her to wrap her head around, it was also a way to not have her in the boys storyline because I don't think they wanted to deal with having Starlight fight against the boys as well, because you can already see it was pretty difficult to not have any of these characters kill each other. When two of them are pretty powerful soups, two of them are normal, Huey ends up shooting MM. However, after that happens, MM just locks himself away, and then after Huey gets cut, he runs out of ammo, which he conveniently uses all of it on Kimiko, who is the one there that can actually heal from it. So then he decides to, guess what, lock himself in a little chamber until it all wears off. It just felt like such nonsense that was going on. We didn't need any of it. Some of it was cool, like the moments with Frenchie, especially him manipulating Soldier Boy, as I already mentioned. However, aside from that, I feel like a lot of it was a waste of time, especially because V1 wasn't even there. So it felt like a big waste of time. However, I feel like the worst thing is actually the entire sequence between Butcher and Homelander. And this is something that I should objectively love. It was really cool for Butcher to be able to see Homelander in that state, to see him so weak, to see him groveling for immortality, to see him truly afraid. However, in this moment, I just asked myself, why the hell didn't they ever look up what is in that cell, either before this happened or after this happened? And I understand that there are still episodes that will come out, so maybe they could look it up, but I can almost guarantee that they will not do any type of research into why the hell the strongest soup is quite literally in such a weakened state that he is puking up blood. It is just utterly absurd, and I feel like they tried to write their way out of this by having Homelander say to Butcher that he doesn't have the virus. However, I feel like there are multiple different ways he could have killed Homelander in that moment, and even if he couldn't have killed Homelander in that exact moment, they could have at least researched what was in there. And I know I already mentioned how they might be able to do it in a later episode, even though I really don't see that being the case. I feel like it will be totally forgotten and never brought up again. However, what's even more asinine is the fact that they could have looked this up before going there. They talked to Stan Edgar. Stan Edgar quite literally was the CEO of Vought, and as we heard from Homelander, he got a lot of classified information. I can almost guarantee that Stan Edgar had way more information than Homelander about this facility. So why the hell did Stan Edgar never research what was in that room? What would be capable of doing such physical harm to such incredibly powerful soups? It just, to me, creates a huge issue that literally has something that is able to weaken Homelander, the person we're trying to kill, right here, and we're not going to address it. We're not going to revisit it at all, and they're never going to explain why no one tried to research that before. There are multiple people within Vought that should have had access to the information, and as they see Homelander snapping further and further, if they don't decide to utilize that information, they are just idiots. So in my opinion, that just really bothered me. However, speaking speaking of Stan Edgar, the other thing about this episode that really bothered me is we did not get to see the conversation between Homelander and Stan Edgar. I wanted to see Homelander as the CEO of Vought talking down to Stan Edgar. I wanted to see him finally feel like he is on top, finally feel like he has the upper hand over Stan Edgar, only for Stan Edgar to be calm and composed the whole time, to make Homelander lose it more and more, just trying to get the V1 out of him, and have Stan Edgar point out to Homelander that he sees that he isn't some god. He sees that he's actually a weak coward who's incredibly afraid. I just feel like we could have gotten such amazing dialogue exchanged in that moment between those two characters. So the fact that we didn't get to see it is a huge shame in my opinion. Stan Edgar is one of my favorite characters in this entire series, and I absolutely love how he has always talked to Homelander. So I feel like him talking to Homelander in the type of state that Homelander is in would have been absolutely awesome. However, they decided not to do that. Instead, we got to see a family storyline with Starlight, with characters that we will probably never see again, and if we do, one or two of them will end up being killed to give Annie even more trauma. One of the other things that I had an issue with is we finally find out what was up with Noir, and it's not a Homelander clone or the original Noir brought back to life or someone that Stan Edgar put in there. I think the one person's name was Sam, who had similar powers to Homelander. No, it was just the replacement Noir who was method acting, which to me was just incredibly stupid. I just feel like they could have set something really cool up. So to me, I just feel like that's kind of a waste, and it is really lame that all he was doing was just method acting. However, all those complaints aside, I feel like the good in this episode probably outweighed the bad. However, it is difficult considering the two main storylines I definitely had issues with. So hopefully with the next episode, they do give us an actual good story and not something that feels like a bunch of shenanigans that is similar to a side quest that ends nowhere and actually adds even more issues for the overall series, like a literal room that can kill Homelander, the guy you're trying to kill, and no one researches it. But I digress. So all that being said, I'm interested to hear from all of you guys. What did you think of this episode? Did you have as many issues as I did with this particular episode? And who do you think is absolutely confirmed to die? Because Frenchie is my number one that is not making it out of this series. Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.